Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samioti. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show Crosstalk. Well, the Democrats' war against the media, or the media that they don't like, continues. Later this week, Congress will hear testimony from a variety of cable and satellite providers. And these Congress people, particularly the Democrat Congress people, will demand to know what it is these cable and satellite providers are doing to remove from their platforms news providers that the Democrats don't like, in particular like OAN, Fox News, Newsmax, that are deemed to be on the right. Also, which will be next month, Congress will once again haul in their favorites, which is Zuckerberg of Facebook, the Google guy, who's Pinchai, I think his name is, and of course Jack Dorsey of Twitter. And again, they will demand to know what it is that they're doing about combating misinformation and disinformation on their platforms. So there are several aspects to this story. First of all, we must remember the Democrats, and this is really largely coming from the Democrats, they've been waging this war against the media ever since 2016. If you remember, after 2016 and the defeat of Hillary Clinton, they blamed that on Russia, and specifically they targeted the media for allowing Russia bots and Russian disinformation to get an airing, and which the Democrats deemed cost Hillary Clinton the election. And this continues with this whole talk about deplatforming and because these are providing disinformation and so on. What's important to note here is that there is clearly an attack here on the First Amendment. The notion that unless it's government itself that is banning free speech, then somehow the First Amendment doesn't apply is utter nonsense. The moment government steps in and tries to bully private corporations to deplatform, to discriminate against certain points of view, then the First Amendment applies. It doesn't have to be government directly banning speech. If the government goes in and starts pressuring giant corporations to deplatform points of view that they don't like, then the First Amendment applies. The other thing is that this is the New York Times published an article on this, generally extremely positive about this attempt by senior politicians to coerce the cable and satellite providers to deplatform viewpoints the New York Times doesn't like. But the New York Times kind of laments, saying, well, it may be a little bit difficult to get this done. However, the positive for the New York Times is it looks like the war against disinformation is being waged in the courts, and because there are these powerful entities like the Dominion of Voting Systems that are suing a variety of people, including Rudy Giuliani, Michael Lindell, the pillow provider, and the New York Times says this is entirely positive way of combating disinformation, using the courts in order to crush opposition. It's very ironic because when we talk about the First Amendment of free speech, we often think about the New York Times, because there was a landmark case in 1964, which was New York Times versus Sullivan, which the New York Times won, which set the marker for free speech. In that case, we don't have to go into the details of it, New York Times actually published something that was false. It was they published an advertisement on behalf of Martin Luther King. The advertisement what, however, contains falsehoods. The New York Times was sued by the head of the Montgomery Police Department, and they won because the New York Times published something that was false. Alabama Supreme Court upheld that decision. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court overturned the decision and said that the criterion should be not whether something is false or defamatory, but whether it was published with malice.
Malice.
That's what it said. It was having malice. In other words, it was malicious intent. Just because something is wrong or something is defamatory, that doesn't mean that you can sue and gain money as a result. And this has set the criterion since almost now 60 years for free speech in the United States. So it is somewhat ironic that here is the New York Times championing powerful corporations using the courts to crush viewpoints that they don't like. Peter, what was your take?
Well, you put your finger on the right word, malice. What was Russiagate? What was the Russiagate hoax? Was that malice? I'm absolutely convinced it was malice. Okay. Yes. I mean, the New York Times talking about disinformation. First of all, what is disinformation? Can you define it? No one ever likes to define it. Like a systemic racism. Nobody ever defines it. Okay. You know, but the standard in which the writers at the New York Times are applying would demand the deplatforming of the New York Times.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Now, one of the hardest things to do in a court of law is to determine intent, and that's why it usually is not ever pursued, because it's just so hard to do. Malice is easier to prove. But this whole, again, there's just no self-reflection. I mean, did some of these news outlets like Fox, did they bring on guests that had opinions that may not have been substantiated? Yes, but that happens to every news outlet by definition. Okay, this is why we call it the public square. You may say something I don't like, but you're protected to say it. Okay. You know, I think that, you know, some of these other news outlets, you know, on the right may have a little bit to worry about. But I watched all of the coverage on Fox very, very closely. And I didn't see any of, with the exception of maybe Lou Dobbs, that went way too far. Instead of just questioning the results, he was questioning those that made the claim that it was a clean and fair election. But that's, you know, the First Amendment is messy. It's intentional that way, okay, to keep more voices there. But to be focusing only on certain news outlets with the intent to have them shut down, it shows you have no bragging rights when it comes to the First Amendment. Look, anyone that's watching this video, George and I, if we were forced to watch, and I stress forced, to watch MSNBC and CNN, we would be mentally scarred, okay, scarred because of their intense bias. And if you want to use the word disinformation, their disinformation. Okay, I mean, you know, Ted Cruz, like the Muppet as he is, he goes and escapes the cold in Texas under the cover of darkness, and then he's, well, I was just escorting my family and all of that, you know, and then, you know, he gets, well, how many news cycles covers that? And then Cuomo, well, he's could be facing some very serious charges. Okay, and it just gets a snippet. Okay, so talk about disinformation, non-information, information by omission. You know, I mean, the New York Times is in no position to be sorting this kind of thing out. The way I look at it is this: the public square has evolved because of the internet. Okay, and I'm more worried about the internet providers going on some kind of censorship spree. Okay, but it's not the government, so it can't be censorship. No, it's a public square. You've got to get up to speed on the reality that we have today, because that's how we all communicate. That's how we all live our lives. I mean, that's how we get on airplanes. That's how we access our bank account. Everything that we do here. So this is, you're absolutely right. You started out, this all goes back to Hillary's loss in 2016 and the venomous attitude they have towards anything that allowed that to happen, except for they never made any mistakes. No, she was an awful candidate, okay? She was a particularly awful candidate, and it was a lousy campaign. Robbie Mook, I mean, do I need to say more, all right? So this politics of vendetta and settling accounts. It's tearing everything apart. It is so completely unnecessary. Look, Democrats, liberals, lefties, you got the White House. You got both houses of Congress. And the courts won't intervene to stop you. I mean, what are you all worried about? You got it going.
Right, right. No, that's exactly right. But what is truly alarming here is that here is government that is coercing giant corporations, and the giant corporations are happily going along with this. Yeah. And this means that the First Amendment. I mean, the First Amendment was already involved. Despite all the libertarian arguments, oh, private company, private company, private company. Look, I mean, there's a way of measuring. If you have a virtual monopoly, let's say 75, 80%, then yeah, the First Amendment applies. And you can't just keep hiding behind, oh, private company, so we can do what the hell we like. No, there've been court rulings on this, like the town newspaper. If it's a town newspaper and there's no other newspaper, then the First Amendment applies. And so the same thing with these corporations. But now, when you have politicians who are threatening them, then you say this is viewpoint discrimination, because they're specifically targeting the news outlets that these politicians don't like. When they say Fox News, OAN, Newsmax, well, these are all essentially outlets that are on the right. They're anti-democrat, and here is the government trying to coerce the cable and satellite providers to drop them. I mean, this is clearly the First Amendment applies here, and the same thing goes with these with the internet providers. If you go to Twitter and say, hey, drop all the people like Trump or Trump supporters and so on, then clearly the First Amendment applies. And this is, it is shocking that, you have the New York Times, which, as I say, it's always been dining out. It's been dining out for 60 years on that lawsuit that when the New York Times versus Sullivan. We were in the forefront of the fight for free speech. Yeah, but what have you done for me lately? You haven't been in the forefront of the fight for free speech in a long time.
And what we're moving to, it seems to me, is that when looking at the First Amendment, what they want to do is they want to turn it into a privilege for the few, a privilege for those that that mimic their ideological disposition. They don't want it to be a right anymore, okay? They want it to be, actually, if they had their way, it would just be the professional managerial class would have a voice, okay? And everyone else, well, you can earn it, maybe we can put you on probation, maybe, but it's not going to be clear cut anymore. That's exactly the direction that we're moving in. And if we're going to go down that path, then it's worthless, okay? Because then it's just interpreted through ideology, and it survived a lot, and I hope it's going to survive this. But the constellation of forces that are all lined up, that's what's really scary. And one of the things, I've often thought, it's a very cold winter here in Moscow this year, and so you're inside a lot. And George, I was just thinking how fast all of this stuff is happening. How fast is it? Our world and our rights are shrinking right before our eyes. And what I find so pathetic is that the journalists are at the forefront of this. Journalists are picking winners and losers. That is something that is new in our lifetime.
Right.
They're picking winners and losers.
That's exactly right. And you have to also remember that if in fact it was the journalists who kind of began this war against free speech, the war against the big tech, trying to pressure them to deplatform others. I mean, it was CNN, it was New York Times that started coercing them. Hey, you've got this person there, you've got this person there. You know, this is a Russia bot, and so on. So they were the ones that started this. So really, you know, if you think about, say, 10 years ago, you know, basically the big tech did pursue a kind of hands-off policies, and we're just going to let it rip. This censorship that now Facebook and Twitter are exercising is in response to what CNN, or New York Times, Washington Post did, and then of course in response to the political pressure. And you know, clearly, there's always a good reason to ban speech. I mean, you can always say, yeah, it has terrible influence, you know, disinformation, violence, and and so on. You know, that's all. You know, all repressive, all dictatorships always make that case. You know, say, well, you know, not only is this viewpoint wrong, but it has terrible influence. You know, all these stupid people are going to do terrible things as a result of this. So that's the argument. No, there's nothing new about this. I mean, it's always the argument on behalf of repression. Well, this is disinformation, and it will have deleterious consequences on people who are not so intelligent.
And also it's a business model for legacy media. I mean, they don't like this competition. This is something they really abhor, is I mean, we joked about it, but it's not so funny, is that, you know, there's that one niche left, podcasts. You know, they're unfettered, you know, to use the New York Times language, you know, they're unfettered, okay? And this is, you're right. I mean, in a classical sense, we've thought about censorship as what governments do, but this is something new, and it's actually more threatening, I would say, because, you know, you and I can challenge the U.S. government, and the government has to respond. They just can't ignore you. But if I challenge Google, YouTube, Facebook, crickets, they won't ever answer you. The government has to react to you. Okay, this is what makes this really Orwellian.
That's exactly right, and that's why it's better if something is regulated by government, precisely because, well, then you have some remedies, and then it becomes explicit. If it's a matter of, well, there's this kind of tacit pressure that government imposes, but say, hey, well, we're not actually, imposing any laws or anything. It's, we're just having a nice little conversation, very friendly, back and forth. So then you say, oh, it was a private corporation that censored you. Nothing anyone can do about it, right? Twitter can ban anyone it likes. So yeah, there's absolutely, it's better if it's directly done by the government, because then you have a remedy, you can go to court. But this way, it's really despicable. It's a little like, when that guy, Elliot Higgins,
Hellcat, yeah.
Yeah, but Hellcat, yeah, exactly. Basically, they launder intelligence provided by governments, and we have nothing to do with it.
Official leaks.
Exactly. Hey, we're good. This guy's just a journalist. He's just doing his journalistic work. Nothing to do with us.
He's another Julian Assange, right?
Exactly. This is another Julian Assange. That's right.
Yeah. He's the anti-Assange. That's why he's protected and lauded, and money is laundered his way. Okay, that's exactly one. What is happening right now is the ultimate law of unintended consequences, because if they're going to be successful in shutting down half the public sphere, then your totalitarianism is safe, but then other ideas, unfettered ideas, will be beyond your reach, and that creates a very stressful and distrusting society.
Right.
I've said it all along. I mean, my values are not Zuckerberg's values. I'm honest about it. He probably would admit it. Okay, but does Facebook have the guts? Does it have the strength, the fortitude to accept other ideas? And I've said so many times in so many different fora is that I think we could determine like 98% of what probably shouldn't be on these platforms. And I think it's really clear. Then you get that like that 2%, which is really difficult. And you and I would have to step back and say, that's a tough one, okay? But that can be worked out, okay? They make it sound like, everything that comes out of Fox, for example, is incendiary. It's not. It's just another point of view.
Well, that's exactly right, because in fact, it isn't that complicated, because the First Amendment has never protected pornography. The First Amendment has never protected doxing, you're publishing people's addresses and so on. So it is never protected obscenity and so on. So that's fine, but the First Amendment does protect political speech. You could be wrong. No one says that only speech.
No, not only can you be wrong, you can be bat crazy wrong.
You
can
be bat crazy, exactly. You can if you want to write the moon is made of green cheese, that's it. You go ahead and write.
I can handle it. Can you handle it? I think most people can handle it. Most people can handle it.
I think so. So the fact that they're saying, oh, this is all terribly, no, it's exactly the same as what the First Amendment has always done. You can restrict pornography, you can restrict clearly personal slander, threats of violence, whatever. But when it comes to political speech, you can't just simply start picking and choosing. Well, I don't agree with this, therefore I will claim that this can have terrible consequences, and I'm just going to ban it. No, then you're clearly you're violating the First Amendment.
Well, I go back to Russiagate. I mean, what kind of damage did the Russiagate hoax do to the body politic? It poisoned it. Right. It poisoned it. Yes. So, I mean, given the New York Times standard, then they should challenge YouTube to drop all of the videos on MSNBC, CNN, and all the rest of them. Okay, right. They should be expunged because it was disinformation.
It was definitely disinformation.
But it's been demonstrably proven to be misinformation.
Exactly.
It's been proven.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And whenever now anyone brings up the question of the disinformation that was Russiagate, the same media say, oh, ancient history, let's move on. No one's interested in any of that.
What this did to our politics will be with us for the rest of our lives. It'll be a generational thing. It's not going to be able to, and you and I have talked many, many times how the hoax has bled into policy now.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, because one of the worst candidates for president in the history of the republic lost to a reality program host. Okay.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And the consequences have been dire, and they're still with us. With given Biden's speeches when he's ranting and raving about Russia, and then you go through Twitter on any particular day on Twitter and put in Russia, and just go through tweet after tweet of venom directed, racist venom directed at Russia. And these are from not just random people. These are all blue tick people, people who have big jobs in big media corporations. They have CNN, whatever. It's this venom and the hatred that's directed. I mean, today there's something by Keith Olbermann, who's always been a little bit, what should we say?
What do they say? Touched on the head, I think they used.
Exactly. Yes, I was thinking of a polite way of putting it. And he grandly says, "F you, Vladimir Putin." Boy, that's a really.
Yeah, and apparently he makes some kind of illusion that he's of Russian descent.
Yes, exactly, some Russian descent. Yeah, I don't know how he gets it, because his name isn't even remotely Russian.
It could be very Eastern European. Okay, I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, but that's Eastern.
No, but you're right. I mean, when people talk about this kind of language, which I think is abhorrent, it doesn't move the needle anywhere to and affect anything. Is that if you were to apply the Russophobic slurs that you hear and read all the time to any ethnic group, you would be banned.
Yes, absolutely. Presenting Russia as this malign force, always doing something evil, in the world, that is a nice little consequence of Russiagate, for which the New York Times, which collected all these Pulitzer prizes, has never owned up. Has never once said, maybe we got it wrong. No, I mean, it's still proud of the Pulitzers he's won for all their ridiculous Russiagate coverage.
The thing that's never addressed in a rational, cool-headed way is that, I would say to these blue check people, why should the United States have hegemony in the world? And what is that hegemony given the world? Okay, is it a net positive? Because see, what all of this is about is that the world is changing and they cannot comprehend that it may not be to the benefit of the ruling classes in the United States and their allies around the world. Hegemony is coming to an end. And instead of stomping your foot and beating your chest and blaming someone else, maybe you should look at why it's happening. Because no country in the world threatens the United States. None. Okay. And that's why when you have the hegemon descending, is that's when it's most dangerous, because it feels injured, and it will lash back. And instead of being more responsible, more mature, and say, maybe if we rebuilt the country, had well-paying jobs, had a healthy workforce, actually believe that 2 + 2 = 4, you might actually move the country forward. Okay.
Right. No, that's right. So, I mean, but it's always a safer bet to start attacking the media and demand that views be deplatformed. And I am sure.
Oh, so it'll just go away. Okay.
Yeah, and
that's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It'll just deplatform it, and as if it didn't happen.
Right. So 2-3 years ago, the craze was we have to deplatform all the Russia bots. Now the craze is we have to deplatform the white supremacists, whoever they may be. But the point is that what's consistent is the demand that somebody be deplatformed, somebody be silenced. And as I say, this is coming from the Democrats, and it's quite an alarming development, and it's not about to end anytime soon.
And we'll end on this. Why? Because they don't have an argument anymore, because they're focused on power. They're not focused on reason and on solutions. They're only focused on power and what that power does for them. And there's a very, very strong material reward when you have that power.
Yeah. All right, Peter, thank you. We will, of course, be back. Remember, we are now on Rumble, so look us up on Rumble. And remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.